And what I wanted to talk about was the issues around the modernisation of our second chamber here in the UK, and hope that stimulates and provokes some discussion. And what I say is definitely my own personal opinion. It would be highly provocative here in the UK Parliament, as well as perhaps anywhere else. But just to acclimatise you to how things are, the House of Lords is our second chamber in the UK Parliament. It is unelected. It's largely appointed for life. I was appointed some 14 years ago at the tender age of, in my mid-40s. 45, something like that. But the balance of power is held in our House by non-political crossbench members of the House of Lords, which is important in respect of the governing party of the day has to win the argument in our chamber. It can't just use political muscle to force its will. Obviously, like every other parliament, the functions of our parliament are representative, they are legislative, and in our case, they are executive. So we don't have a directly elected executive, no directly elected president appointing whoever she or he might want into ministerial office. They all have to be drawn from within the parliament. And that means that our primary chamber, I was a member of the House of Commons for 9 years, is elected. It is where the executive is formed, and it is dominated by the executive. It's dominated by government action and scrutiny of government action and the representative functions of those that are elected to serve in that place. It doesn't have much time for legislation. It doesn't do legislation, frankly, in my opinion, that well. And that's where the second chamber of the House of Lords adds its value. And probably it's the place where it really, it's the only way in which it adds significant value over the House of Commons. And it uses the experience and the expertise of those of us who've been here for some time, who've had experience in the other place, but have had experience elsewhere as religious leaders, as former heads of the Bank of England, of the Armed Forces, leading medics, etc., etc. And it's also, because it's unelected, the advantage is it's not unduly swayed by the media and by populist causes. It tries to be more rational and more long-term in its view and see beyond the next election into trying to do what's right. So it has some strengths, but it has problems. It has problems of legitimacy. We have still some hereditary members who, there's some 98 of them who are here by birth, effectively. And we have people whose job it is to be here because they are bishops in the Church of England, but not in any other Christian church or indeed any other faith, which is an anachronism and no longer really appropriate. And we have a problem of legitimacy in that people like me are appointed by patronage politically of the Prime Minister of the day or the leader of our party, and that doesn't feel appropriate in a modern setting. And then beyond those narrow problems that we have in Parliament, like many other parliaments around the world, we have wider problems of political engagement in this country and division being created by populism, by the use of tools of social media and so on and so forth. So the real stresses and strains of climate change, of migration related to that change, et cetera, that are fueling a need for significant change, and that's difficult for societies and for countries to be able to adapt to. And when I then think about the need to modernize the second chamber, I also think about what's been the impact of technological revolutions through history, and what they've then meant in terms of public demand for better engagement with the decisions that are being made over their lives. So the big print revolutions and the spread of reading educated a few more people and led to the beginnings of an elected house in our parliament, some centuries ago. Then, as we industrialized and we had to then educate a wider working population, that education led to male suffrage here in this country. And then post-war, as women entered the labour market, post the First World War, that led, and wider education of women too. Then we had female suffrage, but now we have a digital revolution, and we've kind of, yes, there's a little bit more we might be able to do to have 16-year-olds be able to vote, but with the digital revolution, there are new demands for engagement, and there are certainly new pressures on representatives, some of which are really unpleasant and unhealthy in terms of the level of interaction, the volume of interaction, but also the bile, the hatred that comes with some of that interaction, particularly on social media. So the sort of core question is whether second chamber reform can answer both of the problems of legitimacy and disengagement in the political process. And here, my thinking is to go to, first of all, thinking about citizens' juries and citizens' assemblies, which are in a non-digital form, but could be done more using virtual tools and done more remotely. We're having an assembly now internationally using video technology, and that will become easier and easier as AI learns to help translate simultaneously for you, creates automatic transcripts, can do a lot more for us in terms of our ability to participate in citizens' juries and citizens' assemblies. That idea that we can select people at random by lottery to take part and to hear evidence in the way that you do in a jury trial in the criminal justice system, which we're much more familiar with, but can hear evidence presented by experts or presented by expert advocates, and have it distilled down in a way that makes sense to them as untrained ordinary people, and then ask them to make judgments, I think is an interesting opportunity for us to think about how we might extend the engagement of Parliament to a wider group of people. And in that, my interest would be that we change our House of Lords from now a bloated chamber of some 800 plus people, second only to the People's Assembly of China in terms of the size of our chamber. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all. Reduce that right down to no more than 100, but supplemented then by the public, and the public engaged by lottery. And what I would suggest in that context, two things. First of all, that 100 would be appointed for periods of time no longer than 2 general election cycles by an appointments committee that is populated by the public, selected at random for jury service, to sit on an appointments committee after each general election and to decide who the next 50 would be that would be appointed in, and 50 are appointed after every general election. And then people would submit their case. They could be reappointed if they've already been sat. And those 100 people then perform a function similar to what we do at the moment in terms of the committee work that we do, providing detailed scrutiny and oversight, providing recommendation to ourselves as we do at the moment as legislators, so that particularly when we look at secondary legislation, when we look at regulation going through, we have some expertise and some proper reflection from experienced people who understand the interplay between primary legislation and secondary legislation. And that's what those 100 people could spend their time doing, and I think properly adding value to both the work of the primary chamber and then the work of legislation. And there, in our system here, with systems of first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage of the committee, and then third reading as part of the scrutiny of law as it's being made, we have bill committees made up of parliamentarians, made up of members of the House of Lords that do the detailed scrutiny. Why not replace the bill committees of parliamentarians with bill committees of the public? So again, they do jury service. They're selected at random. A couple of dozen people come together to do the committee work on a bill. So they're not asked to come and do all the bills, they're asked to do a bill at a time. So we start to engage the public directly in the work of Parliament. We extend political education. People start to learn about our legislative process. They learn about the complication of some of the decisions that have to be made in Parliament, and provide recommendations from that bill committee through to the primary chamber, to the elected representatives, and they can then decide whether to accept or reject the recommendations of the public as they make law. And in doing so, we make better law. I hope that's helpful.